Well, I went down to the Hampton Bays to watch my friend Mark get married. When one of your friends starts settling down, life gets a little bit scary. There was a girl down on the beach. She smiled as soon as she seen me. She did not shave underneath her arms, but she looked so good in a bikini. What could I do? I fell asleep on the booze. What could I do? I fell asleep on the booze.
Okay, well, you just heard a piece of music that Walt selected called "Fell Asleep on Her Boobs," and I have to appreciate it because I'm very much in favor of memory pillows myself. So that I think we should move on though. This next segment is not sponsored by Fell Asleep on Her Boobs. It's sponsored by Cigar Money, the luxury cigar accessories and apparel provider. And if you use the coupon code SR2008, you will get 5% off your next order. And he's got those Minrani Encyclopedia of Post-Revolution Havana cigars in stock. So, go over there, pick them up while they still got them, and get your 5% off. It's a heck of a deal. All right, well, let's just move right into the first question here from Rick via the contact form. Okay, I hope this question doesn't get too long. That's a good way to start. Some people try to remove the band on a cigar before they light it. Some prefer to remove it after the cigar is 2/3 gone, thinking the heat helps loosen the glue holding the band to the cigar. In either case, there are cigars where the band is somewhat loose to start with, or really stuck to the cigar, no matter how much they work with it, before lighting or after 2/3 gone, still destroys the wrapper when trying to remove it. What is your suggestion for these hard-to-remove bands? What do you think, Walt?
Well, before I get to my answer, fortunately, it was time to remove the band on my nub, and it slipped right off with absolutely no issue, and I really prefer when the bands do that. Now, occasionally when they're stuck, I try to wobble them a little bit. I always like to slip the band off rather than tear it. It's just something I do. I like to slip them off and toss them into a container and then tear them later so that I can glue them down to something. But I always try to wiggle it as much as I can to kind of pop it free when it's stuck. There's some instances where the band is very tight to begin with, and they're a little generous with the glue, and in that situation, the only thing you can do is just rip it off. If I'm really having trouble with it, I don't typically take bands off before it's required. But when I say when it's required, I mean like I'm going to burn the band. So I think that the heat does help soften the glue a little bit. I don't know to what extent it does that. It seems to help, but then again, I don't try to remove bands very often, long before that point. So I really don't have a control to base that off of. Funny little story. A couple weeks ago, I was in a cigar shop, and this guy got a cigar, sat down, he's smoking a cigar, and he was one of the types that takes a band off, pretty much right after he lights the cigar. And he was fighting with this band and fighting with it, and he tore the wrapper, and the wrapper was torn pretty bad, and he still hadn't got the band off. So what he did at that point was, well, you know what? I'm just going to leave this band off, but since the wrapper's torn, I'll just take the whole wrapper off. And here he is sitting down, kicking back, and really enjoying the cigar that was just nothing but binder and filler. It was kind of comical to see like this really rough, raw cigar with an ornate band on it, but I don't know that I could do that. I think if be as gentle as possible to try to pop that band free. If you carry around the Zycar tools like I do, there's a small knife blade in there, and on a rare occasion I'll use that to try to slice the band without damaging the wrapper, and that works from time to time. But you just have to be very careful. If you don't have any tools in your pocket or anything like that, I would say just let the cigar heat the band up a little bit, and just work with it gently, but just try to wiggle it as much as possible without stressing the wrapper leaf too much, and you should be okay. But what do you think, Brian? How do you get rid of your stubborn bands?
Well, I've become a little bit of an artiste when it comes to removing bands. As you can see, I've actually got a surprising amount of my nub left, and I slid the band off with no issues, which is nice. But I found what I did have to do with this is what I have to do with a number of cigars actually. There's too much glue. That's what really is the case. Is too much glue and possibly a little bit of it oozing due to humidity and temperature as they're sitting in the box. But I usually when I'm trying to free a stuck band, first of all, I leave it on until I have to take it off. I usually try to take it off before the band gets too hot, just because I don't like to burn my fingers, and I like to have a little extra wiggle room when I'm messing with the band to take it off. So what I'll typically do when it's really stuck on, and sometimes it'll just really be stuck on, is I actually will apply a little bit of pressure to the band and kind of gently move my thumb around the cigar. And what it does is it creates a little bit of a kind of a pocket of a section of distance between the band and the wrapper. And sometimes as you're gently going around, it's enough to delicately pop the glue off of the wrapper without ripping it. It doesn't work 100% of the time, and I frequently find I got to do that more towards the top of the band and again at the bottom. So it's just a little bit of a pressure, kind of moving gently, rotating the cigar, and I find that helps a lot. But sometimes, and the other issue is, of course, it invariably will nick some part of the leaf, and it'll cut into it if you're not careful taking it off. But that's generally what I do. And in some cases, if it's just going to be more hassle than it's worth, and especially if I have a lot of a particular cigar band, like sometimes I try to, for whatever reason, I like to keep them all wound up, all glued together the way they come off the cigar. If I've got a ton of them like that already, like with my Arganese specifically at the barber pole, because it's so easy to start tearing the double wrappers on the way down. I find that the Arganese, I don't have any problems just gently popping the, opening the back of the band. It just seems to come off very nicely without ripping or discoloring the band too much on the one side. So I do that. But when it comes down to it, if you don't collect bands, I mean, the important part is just getting that off. I leave my bands on. I don't know. I don't leave them on because I think they're necessarily going to keep the cigar any more solid. Preventing any kind of wrapper unraveling. That's generally not a problem. That's gonna happen or be fixed too much by the cigar band. Though it has happened a couple of times. I have had a case where having the band in place has kept the cigar from unraveling until the very end, and allowing me to get a reasonably good smoke out of it, where otherwise I would probably wind up throwing it away. Wow, I got lost somewhere in this little discussion here, but oh yes, I leave it on just because I'm just kind of putting off the hassle of taking it off, and also it's part of how the cigar comes. I think it's the band is on there for a reason. It's part of the cigar as a whole. It's kind of fun to look at, and it kind of looks sad when it's all torn up and crumpled up in an ashtray. So I kind of like to see it on there for a little bit. And also, if you're smoking and you're in the shop and somebody asks you what you're smoking, you don't have to say anything. You can just show them the cigar. Say, oh, I'm smoking one of these, and then they can see. Or or people who are curious and just don't feel like asking can peek over and see what you're smoking. So it's kind of handy in that way too. It's not for showing off purposes. I keep bands on like my Sancho Panza just as much as an Opus X. So it's not like, woohoo, look at me, I got an Opus X, jazz hands. No, it's part of the cigar. I think it's part of the art that is a cigar. So I like keeping it on there. It gives me something to look at while I'm puffing. So that's kind of the way I go with it. So I think I pretty much covered all of that. Do you have anything else you wanted to add, Walt?
Yeah, while you were talking, it just occurred to me that, you know, sometimes when I get those troubled bands, I do the same thing you're talking about. Just sort of rotate the cigar, give it a little pressure to create a little bit of a gap between the band, and it'll pop. And also, on occasion, I find it easier to set the cigar down, let it cool for a minute or two, just kind of, I don't know, draw out your puffs for a little bit, and allow the cigar to cool a little, and then slip the band off the other way and take it off of the burning foot. I found that a lot of times that it's actually easier to do it that way than to try to pull it back over the cap, because, you know, the cap is applied over the cigar, and a lot of times when you get these really heavy bands with a sharp edge, they'll slice and tear the wrapper a little bit. So when you have a band like that, I like to go the other way with it. It sort of just kind of goes with the sort of like a grain direction of the cigar, where it just kind of rolls over top and it doesn't do much slicing and dicing. But that would be my only additional tip for getting off a troubled band, is try going the other way with it. Sometimes it works out fairly well.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. You know, I think I remember us discussing this, because I do that occasionally too. But a lot of times when I'm doing that, I don't have the patience to let the cigar cool down. I guess it depends on what I'm doing. So I usually work it down over the foot the hard way, or pop it off. Yeah, you know, I'm thinking this is something that comes up often enough that once we finally get a frequently asked questions page put together about miscellaneous cigar questions, this is probably a good candidate for that. I think we may need to go in depth on this for that too.
You know, on a band-related question that really has nothing to do with this particular question, Jerry recently did a review of the Punch Grand Cru No. 2 Maduro, the vintage line from JR Cigars, and you know, he was showing some discoloration behind the band, and it got me thinking about that particular cigar. Now, at that point in time when those came out, I guess they were 2000s, I wasn't smoking cigars. And it just kind of struck me odd to see that big vintage 2000 vintage 2000 band on there. And, you know, Brian, did you take notice of that at all, and wonder if JR Cigars popped the original band off and reapplied a vintage band to promote their vintage cigar series or anything? You know, I could if that were to happen, I could see that causing more of a problem, where you've got someone in a factory or facility popping the old bands off and then reapplying new ones over top of maybe a nicked leaf, or a leaf with a minor tear in it. But you know, I don't know for sure that's what happened. Maybe those cigars did have the vintage 2000 label on them. Maybe you know the answer to that.
No, that's really interesting. No, I haven't heard of that, but I have heard of discrepancies in bands, you know, from different places selling them. So I don't know. Yeah, I've heard reports that, you know, people buy a cigar from one place and they go buy it from, say, Cigars International or someplace like that, and it's supposed to be the same cigar, but it's got different cigar band on it. So I always thought that was just a case of them getting, you know, custom bands put on by the manufacturer. But I don't know that I've ever heard of anybody popping a band off. I mean, maybe adding a custom one, but would that cause discoloration, adding one after the fact? You know, I just kind of have to wonder about that. I'd be more inclined to believe that discoloration would come as a result of the band being on there for so long, and something in, you know, there's a certain amount of acid in paper. I don't know exactly what paper, what they use for cigar bands, but just knowing from framing various bits of art and pictures in the past, you know, getting it professionally then, because, you know, I'm all, you know, left thumbs when it comes to things like that. But the acids, I mean, or I would think that possibly that could have a discoloring effect over time. I don't know. It's a really interesting. That's a really interesting question. Not really sure what the answer to that would be, and why it would be discolored like that. But my theory would be the band is probably original, and it probably has to do with something in that specific band. And I got to tell you, I'm guessing that if that's the case, they've probably changed the composition of their band since, because that's kind of nasty a little bit. Yeah, that's all I can think of. That's all I got.
Yeah, I don't know. I just need to go back and watch the video a little closer. It appeared that it appeared as if it were one large band and not two. Then again, I guess I could probably just look on the website and look at the picture Jerry took to get a quick answer to that question. It just seemed kind of odd when I was watching it, and thought maybe I'd bring it up and see if you had an opinion on it. But from here we go on to question number 5, and I've got to scroll down to it real quick. And question 5 comes from Keith through the voicemail. So sit tight, take a listen, and we will be right back.
Hey, good afternoon, Walt. My name is Keith Queen. Just leaving a question here for the your questions and my answer segment. I just want to start off by first saying I really enjoy watching these videos. It's usually for me. I wait till the next weekend to watch it, sit outside on the patio, finish off a cigar, and just kind of enjoy watching you guys answer a few questions. So I thought, why not take a shot at asking one this week? Excuse me, I have a cold. My question is, I currently have like a Vinotemp wine cooler as my humidor. Had it for, I don't know, maybe about 4 months now. It's been great at maintaining temperature and humidity. I'd say temperature usually is about 65 degrees, right around that area, with my humidity stays right at the same number all the time. I'd say about 68. A couple questions on it. I've noticed lately as I've been getting a few cigars, they smoke okay, but I've noticed them a little bit, I don't know if it's just the individual cigars or just the ones I've been picking, but if I push them, kind of press them, some of them are a little hard. If I roll them with my fingers, I can kind of hear it cracking or popping, which concerns me. They still smoke pretty well, but I'm not sure if I'm not losing the integrity of my cigars. I guess my question to sum this up is, should I really be having this Vinotemp lined in Spanish cedar? Like I have boxes in there, but don't really have shells made out of cedar or the walls made out of cedar. I'm not sure if that's an issue if I'm losing moisture. What I'm using to provide humidity is beads, and I also have a Cigar Oasis. The thing with that Cigar Oasis is it never really seems to run. I think those beads keep my RH at about 68 by themselves. So I guess my question is, I go into a humidor at my local B&M, and I'm noticing that their machines are constantly running, kind of adding moisture. I'm concerned with the beads. Do I need to have my Cigar Oasis turned up a little higher than the beads, so that's maybe spraying out a little moisture, adding a little extra to the air, or just having the beads kind of sitting there? Is that fine? I don't know. I'm just concerned because it seems like my humidity is right at the right spot. I have 2 wireless Oregon Scientific hygrometers that both read the exact same thing. I have them in the top and the bottom, so I feel good about the humidity. I'm just kind of worried that my cigars maybe aren't holding up in there. So just want to get your thoughts on maybe why. Appreciate any help. Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, and that was Keith. And while Keith was while Keith was asking his question on the voicemail, Walt and I were being bad and paying no attention and debating over that the band on that Punch ran crew from 2000. And I think what we're thinking is we're going to have to get Jerry in on this and get his thoughts on it, since he was the man that smoked it. So, but getting back to Keith's question, sorry, Keith. We did listen to the question before, so we know what you're talking about. To answer the issue of turning up your Cigar Oasis, I think you're in a spot where a lot of people would like to be at. Yeah, so you're in a spot where a lot of people would like to be at. It's not the ideal situation. Is not for the Cigar Oasis to be running constantly. It's there to try to just to keep things even, keep things maintained. And in theory, once your humidor is seasoned, in this case it's a wine cooler, a coolador. It's maintaining the humidity, and that's what you want. And you've got the dual gauges to check it that it's right. And if it's where you want it, it's great. I wouldn't mess with it, because if you turn that up, what you're going to wind up doing is over-humidifying your cigars, and you're going to also wind up having your puck starting to absorb, humidity from the from that, and they're gonna become oversaturated, and you're gonna get to a point where yeah, you're gonna be in a bad spot. So I think that you're fine. I mean, I think you're in a great spot. You've got a very consistent environment. You're regulating it well with beads, and you've got that as a backup just in case for whatever reason the beads start to dry out and you don't notice it. You know, so I think you're in a good spot. I wouldn't advise turning up the Oasis any. I would just be really happy that things are working out. Now you'd mentioned a popping sound. I think you said when you were smoking your cigars, and I'm not really sure what that might be. Maybe if you took cigars that from a really dry environment, put them in here, you may run into a case where you've got some swelling. If they're over humidified or something already. I didn't remember what you said your humidity was being set at. I think you said 68. I think that's right. It's possible that some of the cigars you're smoking are like a lower humidity and they're overfilled, and it could be the wrappers cracking or popping a little bit because they're swelling up with the heat in addition to all the humidity. Not really sure on that. Nothing's really coming to mind aside from that. I'll let Walt weigh in on that when he gives his opinion on the scenario. What do you think, Walt?
Well, Keith mentioned that sort of crackling sound when he was handling the cigar, sort of rolling it in his hand. And, well, I don't think that's a major concern unless the cigars feel very dry. I think if you're comparing one of your cigars at home that you're maintaining at 68% relative humidity at 65 degrees to one from your local cigar shop, which, as you said, has got this humidifier constantly running, I think the one you feel at the cigar shop is going to be a little more, it's going to be at a higher relative humidity, and the tobacco is going to be a little more pliable, so you're not going to hear that little bit of a crackling sound. I wouldn't be overly concerned unless you were kind of rolling around your fingers a little bit, getting that crackling sound, and the wrapper was actually cracking. Because it sounds like everything is up to snuff. I mean, you're maintaining a specific relative humidity with a specific temperature. You've got beads in there to maintain your humidity. You've got the Cigar Oasis as a backup to raise the humidity as it needs to. I don't necessarily think you need to line the unit with Spanish cedar. I think that you're okay the way you are. The boxes should do a good job of maintaining additional humidity. Plus, the cigars act as a buffer themselves. I mean, there's a lot of tobacco there that'll hold a lot of moisture. So I think all in all, you're okay. You're in a sealed environment, and you've got to remember that sealed environment. I mean, how often do you open the door of this Vinotemp unit? Twice a day, maybe. So you're not getting a ton of exchange when you open the door. Now, your local cigar shop, it's probably running constantly because there's traffic going in and out of the room. The door's opening. It's probably a 3-foot wide door by 6'8" tall. So you're getting a big whoosh of air every time you open it. You're getting a lot of transfer. There's a lot more air movement there. So that unit has to constantly run to keep that room at a proper humidity. And on top of that, the smoke shop owner is probably keeping the relative humidity a little high to account for that. So that's why it's normally running every time you go in there. If anything, I would think that maybe the cigars would be a little moist, or the relative humidity of the cigar would be a little high towards the back of the room, and be a little drier toward the front of the room. But that's what I think is going on there as far as the crackling goes. Your cigars, you said, are smoking fine. So I wouldn't worry about turning up the Oasis unit to get any more moisture in there. I think that the sealed environment is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And the Oasis is just running on occasion as a backup to refill or just to repopulate the unit with humidity. So I wouldn't concern myself with that. And I think I jotted down some notes. I think that's all the key points that you had mentioned. So I wouldn't be overly concerned, unless they start tasting bad, or they taste significantly different from the ones you're picking up locally. And if you prefer that higher relative humidity, then possibly raise your Cigar Oasis a little bit. But at that point, if you're using 65% beads, the unit's holding 68%. You said you have a hygrometer top and bottom, so you know that it's solid throughout. maybe think about upgrading your beads to 70% and cranking up your Oasis just a little bit. And again, that's if you prefer that wetter cigar over your 65 to 68% or what you have now. Also, it could be that you're running a little cool in your vinyl temp unit at 65%. You know, they say ideally it should be 70-70. You know, there are a lot of people that disagree with that and whatnot. And I did a lot of reading on how relative humidity actually works, and I am extremely confused. From what I understand, lower temperature will allow less moisture in the air. So you may, I don't know, while your hygrometers are reading 68%, the water vapor in the air might be lower than that. I don't know. It's very confusing between absolute humidity and relative humidity. At least for me, I'm not a science person, so it's very confusing to me. I'm sure that we've got people on the website that are well versed in this thing, and they'll be happy to chime in. You know, just you know, I'm asking you, please chime in and give us your thoughts. Just drop it in the comment form and help out Keith with his issue that he has here.
Yeah, that's if Walt doesn't have it down, I can tell you that the rest of us probably are pretty clueless about it. But my understanding is pretty close to how Walt has laid it out there. I hadn't even thought of the temperature as being a factor in that. So yeah, I guess it might be worth your while to try to see if you can bump the temperature up a little bit. I don't know too much about the wine coolers. Myself, I've never owned one, so I'm hoping that, I'm assuming that the idea is that they cool stuff. I don't know if you can bump it up to 70 or if they tend to go to 65 by default or how that is. I would guess that there would be a little bit of room for adjustment there. I clearly misunderstood or misheard the popping part. I even when I've had my humidification levels in my humidor up fairly high, there's still some cigars I get, if you kind of squeeze on them or a little bit, you can kind of hear some crackling in them. It's just it could also be that the tobacco is really tightly packed in there, or more, even possibly more likely that maybe there's a little pocket in there, and what you're doing is creating some small cracks in maybe the binder or something like that. It's hard to say, but yeah, you might want to look into that whole temperature thing. And yeah, and I was about the brick and mortar tobacco shop. Yeah, those things have to be constantly running, because especially at one of the shops I'm at, people walk in there, they don't even close the door sometimes. They just leave it open. It'll sit open. Even some of the people that work at a couple of the shops I've been at, they'll walk in and they'll leave it open for like 5 or 10 minutes. I'm like, well, I see that every now and then. I go over and shut the door because I'm like, what are you guys crazy? Are you kidding me? Come on. So yeah, I don't know how much you can look and see what your local tobacco shop is doing and apply that to your own situation, unless you've got a walk-in humidor, and in this case you clearly don't. So, and hey, I don't either. Someday maybe, but yeah, that's all I got. I pretty much I think Walt's right on the top of it though.
All right, Keith. I hope we were able to give you at least a little bit of guidance there on what you may be able to do to correct your issue, or eased your nerves into realizing that maybe it's not an issue. Depending on what you're comparing it to. But at any rate, question 6 comes from John through the contact form, and John says, "I am just starting to get into cigars, and here's what I've found so far. I like milder cigars. I am on somewhat of a budget. I like the longer size because I don't nurse anything very well, so I want it to last. Could you give me some suggestions for cigars to try out as a beginner smoker?"
Well, yeah, I can think of some. I would say you're on a budget, you like them big and somewhat mild. I'd say go for the Flor de Oliva. They make them about as big as you can possibly want them. I know the shop I've got. I was just talking with somebody earlier today about them, and in the shop, my local shop, one of them anyway, has just a ton of them, and they carry the I don't know what it's called, the size exactly, Gigante or Presidente or something like that, but it's a big 8-inch thing. It looks, it's probably about it may be about as big around as this nub, which, you know, now that it's on a toothpick, you probably can't see the ring gauge too well, but that's a good way to go. You know, giant, you know, they can be as big as you want. They've got ones that aren't quite that large if you know, I don't know, want to do something else with your day besides smoke one cigar. Let's see, Sancho Panza. That's always a good way to go. I think maybe I don't know, the double Maduro, maybe if you're liking a mild, that might be a little too full for you. The extra fuerte probably will definitely be, but you know, the regular Sancho Panza, it's an inexpensive cigar, and it's pretty good. Let's see. You know, Dale from Dogwatch Cigar Radio is always talking about the famous Nicaraguan 3000s. Those are inexpensive bundles, and those come in, you know, all of your normal sizes, and so they're going to have, you know, Churchills and whatever else. Let's see here. You know, Oliva cigars are actually, you know, pretty reasonably priced too. I mean, they're going to be probably a little bit more expensive than your Sancho Panzas or any of the bundle ones, but you know, I aside from like the Serie V and you know, I don't find them to be too terribly full. I think you'd be all right with smoking any of those. Let's see. Those are the ones that come to mind. You know, kind of doing a quick mental stroll through the local humidor here. So, what do you think, Walt? What do you have to add?
Well, I think we all have a different dollar value of what a budget line is for each of us. You know, if you're in the like $4 to $5 range, I don't consider that to be a real budget cigar. But you can pick up the Nub Connecticut's now. They come, while they are short, you know, there is a ton of tobacco in them, so they'll last a considerable amount of time. If you want to get down even lower than that, the Series G's are medium, so they're not going to fall into that mild category. I really don't think. But you can get those in a Churchill, and again, they're fairly inexpensive. To get even less expensive, you can go to a Perdomo Fresco, which is a Nicaraguan cigar, so it's got a bit of a bite to it. I would say it's probably medium again, but those are very inexpensive. You can pick those up, and they come fairly large. Just as Brian mentioned, you can get those enormous Flor de Olivas. I don't know that they make a gold that big. The gold is supposed to be the mildest of the bunch. From what I understand, they do make the natural in that monster size, which is mild to medium. You know, it's right in that range, and they're fairly inexpensive. You get a bundle of 8 of those monsters for, they're fairly inexpensive, and they'll probably last you all day. Even if you don't nurse them, there's just a ton of tobacco and a lot of girth there. To get less expensive than that, now I'm really stretching because I don't know what else falls in that sort of 2 to 350 sort of line that's going to be mild or be very mild and large at the same time. I would just say focus on the Perdomo Frescos, the Flor de Oliva Naturals, and maybe even the Nub, depending on, again, like I said, depending on what you consider to be a budget cigar. For me, I think of a budget cigar as $3 either tax included or $3 per cigar shipped. So if that's your opinion of a budget cigar, you can look at budget cigar breakdowns I've done in the past. I usually do those around Christmas time. I don't know how many mild cigars I've done, but all of those cigars are under $3 a piece. And there's a little bit of variety there because I've done it over the last 2 years. So check those out and see if any of those seem like they would be palatable for you. But that's really all I have to offer. Brian, you got anything else? Anything, the light bulb go on while I was talking there?
Well, I was going through a couple, and I'm really bad with prices. I don't know. I just maybe the shock of what they come up to at the register when they're all put together kind of causes that part of the brain to shut down. But I think you can get Yeah, I'm thinking like I kind of tend to agree with you. The three and below range is a good place to go. It is kind of a reasonable budget kind of concept. Just I think the Sancho Panza fits in there nicely, and of course the Flor de Oliva, which we should mention is made by the same people who bring you the Serie V and you know the G and the Special S and all that. I was thinking you might, and I don't remember how. Let's see. Some of the Cinco Vegas lines, the problem is the good ones tend to be a little on the fuller side, but some people like the Cinco Vegas Gold. I've had a few, and they're okay. I mean, I don't get really excited about them, but you can get really large ones, and those are really inexpensive. You know, I think a thing to do might be to you know, go into your local B&M and just find out what they're going to have some bundles there. I guarantee it, and just, you know, ask them about. What you know, I'm looking for something mild, something large. What do you have in a bundle? And just try a few out. You know, it's if you don't like it, you know, you haven't spent too much money, you just pitch it. You know, or you know, whatever. It's no big deal. Heck, you never know. Maybe if you really hate it, and then the tobacconist feels your pain, he might say, "I'll throw that away. I'll give you something else to try." You know, so it's. You know, it doesn't hurt to go in and ask if you have that available. It's a little bit more daunting to do that with online retailers, just because there's no way of sampling it, and in a lot of cases you have to at least buy 5, which is kind of tough. You know, you buy 5 of something it turns out you really don't like. You know, I know some more are going to come to me, and I'm going to think of them. I always do. You know. As soon as we're done recording this, I realize that we should have brought that one up. But you know, there are plenty out there, and I think a lot of cigar lines will have something on the milder end. A lot of them will. So go check it out. That would be my advice. You know, spend some time in your humidor and talk to your tobacconist, or just take our. You know, start with ours and see what you think. Maybe you like them so much you won't need to try anything else. Who knows? Got anything else you want to add to that, Walt?
No, I'm about tapped out on that one. And well, John, I hope we were able to offer you some suggestions there that you'll come to know and love. And that brings us to the part where we just do a quick update on our cigars. And mine, I've reached for the toothpick. Cigar smoking beautifully. I just can't get enough of these new nub cigars. I really like them. They're very nice, rich flavors. Even on the toothpick, it's still staying fairly cool. I haven't had any burn issues. Nice thin burn line. Solid ash. I mean, absolutely no complaints on my end. What about you, Brian?
Well, I am also on the toothpick, as you can see. I've had a little bit of issue with having to relight it a few times, and the ash is a little more crumbly than I had hoped. It's, you know, it could just be a bum stick, or maybe, I don't know, maybe it dried out a little bit at some point along the way, and I didn't let it sit long enough. I thought I had, but you know, you never can tell with these things. I'm liking it. I think it's a good cigar. I'm really interested in trying some of the other ones. It's definitely. I think that the filler. And I don't know the exact breakdown of what all's inside of it, but it seems like I'm getting not as much of the Cameroon flavor as I would have expected. I got a little bit more of it at the beginning, but I think it's the wrapper, because, you know, like all cigars with larger ring gauges, you get a greater percentage of what the filler is as to what the wrapper is. And it could be my palate's a little dry, so I'm not pulling in as much of that flavor. But overall, it's a good cigar. I'm looking forward to trying out some of the other ones too. And it's just a matter of me getting my backside out of this chair and down to the shop. I haven't been down to the shops as much as I could have. It's probably good for my wallet, but you know, this past couple of weeks I've been kind of busy, so. Yeah, that about covers it. So I'm still smoking it. I'm surprised I'm still smoking it. In fact, this has lasted a bit longer than I expected, but which I think a lot of people who haven't tried these will find that they last longer than you really expect them to last, just because of, you know, just the sheer volume of tobacco in there. So it's still very cool on the still very cool at the end, even with the toothpick in it. So we'll see how it goes. And you know, I think that takes us into another production break, doesn't it, Walt?
Yeah, it sure does. So sit tight. We'll be right back with segment 3.